Well, just looking at this whole night, it seems to be that there's a common theme of how, as individuals, we all have to change in some way in order to change something greater than ourselves. And I think that's pretty much what TED's all about. And that's also what I'm here to talk about today, and how we can change as individuals through art, and why that's important. And I have an interest in art because, well, a lot of people know me as an artist. However, that's an idea I struggle with, and I think I've struggled with that my whole life. You see, as an artist, you're constantly being told who you're supposed to be, and that's mainly not an artist. But in addition to being an artist, I'm also dyslexic. And I'm not talking about just the casual dyslexic. Do you know who I'm talking about? Do you? Well, it's that professor who will accidentally misspell a name on the board and turn around to the class and say, "Wow, I'm really dyslexic today." No, that is not me. I'm a psychologist-approved, extended time awarded dyslexic. I'm so dyslexic that today when I was making crepes this morning, I texted my girlfriend and saying, like, "I'm making crepes," and it just... that was supposed to be more funny than it actually was. Anyway, I bring this up because I believe that being dyslexic in our school system has amplified my experience with the arts. I was really excited as a first-year student in high school, and I went to a small Catholic high school in Kalamazoo, to have art class once a day. One 45-minute class to draw and paint whatever I could. And see, that's a big step up from grade school when I only had art class once a week, and homework wasn't a thing. But in high school, the A's I was receiving in the arts held little effect on my GPA compared to the B's and low C's I was receiving in the mathematics, the sciences, English, and foreign language, all of which were required all 4 years of high school. The result of that was I came to Denison believing I was a hard worker, fairly creative, but not intelligent because what I was good at in high school wasn't valued. Now, this is a narrative that's been told a lot of times by more distinguished and academic individuals than me, that there are millions of people around the world that feel they aren't highly intelligent because what they were good at in school wasn't valued. And that's true, but I believe it's not the full story. When I first came to Denison, I was hesitant to declare my major. In fact, I didn't do it until the very last second. And that's primarily because back then I knew as a first year that to be good at something, truly have a shot at changing the world, you have to really believe in your work. And it's clear today that everyone who is here really believes in their work. But back then I didn't believe in art. And I didn't because, like as my girlfriend says, the reason I didn't commit to art is because, to make anyone else believe in what you are doing, you have to believe in it first. So I began to realize as a first-year student that if the world wasn't going to tell me why art was important, I'd have to start to figure out why for myself. And I'm here today to tell you that I do not have the answer yet, but I am getting there. You see, part of the problem for me has always been the world's problems. These big ones, the ones that Dr. Weinberg talked about at the beginning of TED tonight. The fact that 805 million people in the world do not have enough food to lead healthy, active lives. The idea that in 2009, 1% of our country held 35.4% of its wealth, or the notion that in the last century, sea levels have risen 17 centimeters. So how is what I'm doing down in the Bryant Arts Center relevant? How is making pictures? How does that possibly matter? And that's what I was facing, that dilemma. But I think this illustrates a phenomenon about how we think about all of these problems, these big ones. When we think about global climate change, what do we think? We think, well, let's dial down the knob. Let's lower CO2 emissions. When we hear of hunger, let's increase food supply. And when we talk about social inequality, well, let's redistribute the wealth. Yet today, greenhouse gases are on the rise, glaciers are still melting, social inequality is steady. and 1 in 9 people still suffer from hunger. And to top all of this, we have the technology, we have the capability to solve many of these problems, only we don't. I believe, now 15 years into this new century, we are facing a severe loss of self-value, which is perpetuated and reflected in the fact that right now our world is going through a severe lack of creative self-expression. Now that's a big problem. And all big problems need huge solutions, but I'm confident that this problem can be solved. And to illustrate that point, I want to refer to Germany. And I want to look in particular at post-war Germany. You see, post-war Germany was not a very good place, obviously. And it's always interested me, that time period for that country, because how does a country or an individual deal with that traumatic past? And I suspected when I was writing this talk that they might have done that through art. And it turned out to be true. In 1955, there was an exhibition held in Kassel for the first time. The exhibition was called Documenta, and it was held and curated by a man named Arnold Bode. What Bode did, was essentially ask the German people, how do we come together as a country to not hide, to not deny, but confront this recent past? You see, I think as humans, one of the greatest things we struggle with is the past. These things that make for great fictional situations and interesting characters, but very harsh realities. But I don't know about you. But for me, sometimes an explanation isn't enough. Sometimes knowing why you or someone else did something doesn't make it better. In fact, for me anyway, it frequently doesn't. Life still happened, decisions were still made, and no matter what side of the equation you are on, you still have to live with the consequences. This is what this exhibition in Kassel did. It brought together artists from all over Germany, spurred on the movements of Fauvism, Expressionism, and Cubism, and sponsored the careers of a multitude of artists, many of whom wouldn't have had a chance originally. But more than that, what it did is it brought together the German people and created a new art, a new visual culture that was devoid from the past. Now, was Bode successful? Was this exhibition successful? Today, you tell me. Germany is undoubtedly the economic powerhouse of Europe. Berlin is apparently 9 times the size of Paris. And while Germany is ranked number 3 in giving financial aid out to other countries, is that all due to art? Of course not. But I can also tell you that Germany's capital, Berlin, is rapidly becoming the new art center of the world. And Germany gives out more annually to cultural enrichment than any other country, with 1.75 billion. To put that in comparison, the National Endowment for the Arts holds an annual budget of 150 million. That's nothing. Now maybe you're not convinced. So I'm going to tell one more story, and I think it's my favorite story right now. And it's the story of Mike and Sue. I have a step-uncle who I met for the first time about 7 years ago, and Mike, with his wife Sue, sailed around the world. They did it with 2 cats, in 4 years, with a steel boat built in Canada by a couple of guys and a woodworker. During that 4 years, they sailed over towering waves, dodged pirates in Micronesia, and bartered for food on remote atolls in the Pacific. But before any of this, and what I actually find just as amazing, is Mike received a master's in English and wrote stories of sailing the seas. Now, that was where I was going to end that story about Mike, but I actually called him about 2 days ago to ask him if I could use his name in his story. And he said yes. But I asked Mike, because I'd never asked him before, and I don't know why, because it's such an obvious question, but I was like, Mike, where did you get this idea? Who sails around the world? And Mike's a great storyteller, so I'm not going to do it justice, but I'm going to try. And he said that he was sitting on the floor of his house in Duluth, and he was flipping through a picture book. And he came to a painting. The painting was of an old clipper ship resting on a harbor. And he said, Adam, before I had even seen the ocean, I knew I wanted to sail the seas. This is what creative work does. Art is a way for us to see who we could be, where we could go, even when we don't know where we are right now. And the problem with our world seems to be that we think we know where we are. We believe we know who we are. It seems to me we don't. And how can we possibly hope for a future if we're always afraid of what might happen? We need to write a new future. And to do that, we need to destroy these old perceptions of how we view art and self-expression and create a new perception of self-expression which tells all artists to tell their stories and encourages everyone to listen. Because if we cannot value ourselves, we cannot possibly hope to be a part of this future. Thank you.